the possibility of a terrorist attack here on U.S. soil has actually increased over recent years. And according to the director of the FBI, he says, and he warns that an increased terrorist threat because the U.S. is now in a very dangerous place. One thing I can tell you is that right now the United States is in no position to try and win a war. We need additional munitions. We need additional support. We are trying to provide support to Israel, to Gaza, and to Ukraine, as well as many others. One thing that we do know is that the United States is putting themselves in the middle of all these wars. Here's something that the FBI director said the other day. It says the FBI says terrorism threat hits a whole other level after Hamas attacks. Now what we're being told is that there is a heightened chance that we see attacks on either our water supply or our electrical grid. One of those two things. And I'm going to explain more on that in just a moment. All I ask is if you enjoy these daily updates, do me a favor, go ahead, hit that like button, and let's begin. Now, according to the FBI director, he says the reality is that the terrorism threat has been elevated throughout 2023, but the ongoing war in the Middle East has raised the threat of an attack against Americans on the United States to a whole other level. That is what he said in a Senate hearing. Then he goes on to talk about how the 1,400 people that were killed in Israel, this is kind of what is leading to this. He says, the Hamas attack, which killed some 1,400 people in Israel, will serve as an inspiration, the likes of which we haven't seen since ISIS launched its so-called caliphate years ago. So, essentially what he's saying is the United States is in a terrible position, is in a dangerous position, and he doesn't think it's going to get much better. Now, could it get better? Yes. It could get better if there was a ceasefire. And the reason why some are calling for a ceasefire and some are also calling for a simple pause, look at this, it says Anthony Blinken arrives in Israel to press for humanitarian aid. That is this morning. That is as of today. He is in Israel. He wants to see a pause. Now, what would this pause look like? Well, this is what President Biden said just the other day. He said, I think we need a pause. A pause means give time to get the prisoners out. And when he's talking about prisoners, he's talking about the people that do not want to be there. He's talking about the civilians that want to get out because they are fighting for their lives. Okay? Now, one thing that we do know is that a ceasefire from Israel is most likely off the table. And there's multiple reasons why, but one of the biggest ones is what could happen after. Look at this. So this is the reason why we cannot see a ceasefire. It says, for that reason, forcing Israel to accept a ceasefire now would only ensure an even more violent future. When you reward an aggressor and prevent the attacked from fighting back, you simply encourage that aggressor to attack again and encourage other would-be aggressors to do the same. That's why we cannot see a ceasefire. A ceasefire would only make things worse. Now, here's one other thing. Again, this is what President Biden said. I think we need a pause. Because a pause means give time to get the prisoners out. But if we look at this right here, okay, it says the problem for Israel is that the criticism is getting louder, not just among their detractors, but from their best friends. Israel continues this attack, this barrage, on Gaza. Now, people that were against Israel, they've been coming out, but now Israel's friends and allies are coming out and saying that, hey, we need to stop. Well, according to President Biden, there's not a lot of time. Okay? President Biden and the U.S. warned Israel amid the Gaza carnage, it doesn't have long before support erodes. And the reason why they don't have much time is because now the calls to action are getting louder. Everybody wants to know what is going on. Everybody has a question whether or not we should even be in this mess. Look at this. It's from the other day as well. Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren wrote to President Biden with serious concern about Israel's invasion of Gaza. Now, here's the letter. It's a 3-page letter. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm not even going to read much of it, but you can go and read it if you want to, okay? But in this letter, okay, it says right here, as Congress considers if you can see it, as Congress considers the administration's emergency funding request, some of the questions that need to be answered are, and he has this list. These are all the questions that they want answered. Well, down here, I want to read you this, okay? It says the United States must take a leading role in charting out a future that respects the lives of Palestinians and Israelis alike. We can start by answering the questions laid out above. We request that you respond in writing and that your administration provide a briefing in a classified setting as needed in sufficient time for us to consider the President's budget request with the necessary information. So, that is from the two senators, Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Bernie Sanders. Now, one of the reasons why they are now questioning the budgets that are out there is because President Biden has made it very clear he will support some and will not support others. Well, here's one of the things that he is going to have to consider very soon. Let's look at this.
On this vote, the yeas are 226, the nays are 196. The bill is passed.
So the bill that was just passed is this one right here. It says House passes $14.3 billion on Israel aid, setting up a showdown with the Senate. Now, in this bill, this $14.3 billion bill for Israel aid, this actually goes against what the Senate or Democrats are for, because the $14.3 billion bill would rescind $14.3 billion from the Internal Revenue Services funding. Now, that is going to come from the $80 billion that was added over a year ago, but it's to offset the cost. So essentially, how we're going to pay for this aid to Israel is we're going to take it from the IRS. That's what's going to happen to many different bills in the near future, because Republicans say we cannot continue to spend the way we have been spending. Well, what does the White House say? It says President Biden would veto any Israel-only aid bill. That's according to the White House. Now, we've heard this multiple times before, that President Biden would veto the bill. We saw it last year where he actually vetoed a bill that this was going to provide additional assistance, and he vetoed this bill. It was not good enough. So it's not that he is saying that he'd do it. He would actually do it because he does not want to give Israel additional $14.3 billion, but in exchange, we take that money and pretty much rob from the IRS. That's what Democrats are saying. So one thing I can tell you is that it's going to be a struggle to see Israeli aid if it's only to Israel. If it's to Israel and to Ukraine, then President Biden would sign it. But we still don't know if the Senate is going to even put this on the floor for a potential vote. If they do, there's a good chance it would pass through the Senate, and then President Biden would be the one that would need to veto this bill. So it's all up to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and whether or not he decides this is the right time and right move to make. We will find out very soon. We should know in the next few days whether or not this is even being considered. But one thing I can tell you is right now, the noise coming from Israel, coming from Gaza, okay, and the surrounding areas, many countries are questioning whether or not Israel is being truthful as to why they continue this attack. Has it been enough? Should they call a ceasefire? Should they pause, let civilians get out? Well, that is the question. So, as we get more information on this, I promise I'll fill you in on all the latest news and updates, but that is what we know as of right now. Again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing. I'll see you guys on the next one.